Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you joined for this episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Here we are making sure that you can break free from the patterns that break you with Tori Hope Petersen. She has a beautiful book called Breaking the Patterns That Break You. And we are so grateful because this is the time of year, if you're listening live, that everybody struggles with their dark night of the soul. And Tori comes to us from a four space on the Enneagram in the sense that she gets it. She has understood low hope days, suicidal ideation days, moments when you doubt your worth. And yet she is here to tell you she has also climbed up to realize she's no longer a victim and that she has the best tools whenever she has low moments. And so do you. And we're going to give them to you today. So make sure you're right here with us. I want to let you know that this is Tori's launch week for her beautiful books. You can see that in the show notes, and it's a beautiful gift for anyone else you know who might be in those dark days and just needing uplifting and amazing tools. But if you're double tasking, if you're doing something else, this is an episode that really will be good to get centered on. So make sure you come back to us. Take a deep breath, allow yourself to really get whatever you need. In fact, while I was first editing this episode, we had pre recorded. I spent some time jogging with my daughter through the forest while we were preparing to go to an event that reminds me of Tori's book. We are going to the Bridge of Life 5K and adoption foster care run this weekend. And it's a superhero theme because anyone who is really doing the work of waiting for a foster or adoptive parent or doing the work of helping a foster or adoptive child is a superhero. So I love the theme. Perfect. I am so happy to just be a small part of it, representing our business and sponsoring as one of the sponsors. But more than that, I just want to honor Tori for both having walked through the foster care system, now on the other side, and doing that beautiful work herself, along with raising her bio children with her husband, Jacob. It is such a joy to see her reminding us all that even though there are moments and hard days and dark nights of the soul that yet come, and we're going to talk about that and what she does when that happens, yet she's also able to say, here I am, having reminded you and everybody else, I am no longer a victim. And I just saw one of her powerful posts talking about that on her launch week this week. And so I'm so excited to share this episode with you, and just perfectly timed as we're getting to run that race together. And I hope you will fight those battles that you need to fight for others too, even as you're doing your own work to break free from the patterns. Because Tori will tell, sometimes you're doing a little bit of both. You're still fighting your battles, even as you're helping others. And that is okay. Tori's a best-selling author. As you know, she is coming in with this beautiful story. Before we get to her, I'm going to do our marriage minute briefly. And this actually was a moment of a family marriage moment where you just remember that you are a couple, probably listening, and maybe you're single, and that's great too, but you're somebody who influences others. And one of the people I'm influencing, but the influence is decreasing a little, is my daughter Melody, who's graduating soon. So you're hearing me talk more about her because she's in her graduation days, last semester of her high school days, also getting her associates is the plan this May. And what I was mindful of was this week was one of my last weeks to really help her out if she needed help. And so it was very interesting that I said to her, hey, Melody, I see that you're sharing an injustice. If you know she's a 9, you know she has lots of injustices. And I said, this is something I can do for you. I can write an email for you. I can help you out with a situation you're in. But I want to let you know this is one of those last moments where it will not be appropriate for me to be writing emails to college professors, etc. And I just want to let you know I'm here for you. I am here to support you if you need. And she was so healthy when she told me, Mom, I've got this. I've launched well and I know how to handle the situation. And it just reminded me that if you're that person who's also hanging on and maybe grasping for control a little bit, like I think we all can tend to do with our kids, it was such a beautiful, uplifting moment for me to both pause, and having learned that over the years, to just pause and ask, do you need my help and support? Versus coming in with my 8 wing, and her also with her own 8 wing being like, actually, I've got this. And then watching her peers surround her with support. Oh my goodness. I am so grateful and glad for these tender moments together. And yeah, they have a little bit to do with my marriage too, because Wes really respects Melody's space as a fellow body type. And he knows if she needs me, she'll ask. And I'm always looking in those little gray areas. Do you need me? And so it's beautiful to be able to work together to bless the next gen. And we're still learning too, right? So let's head into this episode with Tori in mind, both for you and those you're serving, so that you can get your refreshment this dark time of year potentially, as well as help that next gen. Because some of you have younger kids or grandkids who actually need you to step in more. And trust me, even with Melody, even today, she was giving me all these messages. Do you think I should sing the Tiana song for my senior solo and all these things? And I'm like, absolutely, yes, it's a beautiful choice. But I'm going to also be learning where not to step in. So let's keep learning together and let's welcome Tori right now for this episode. Oh my gosh, we are so thankful to have you on the podcast today. You are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Tori.
Okay, Krista, you are just already my kind of person. You are so sweet. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad. I know our we're in good company. The Enneagram and marriage community just loves to support those who have a heart for breaking generational patterns and
Yeah.
being honest and open about just the destructive ways we can all still be sometimes, even though we're doing our work. And you're so
Yeah.
candid about that. So again, thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, we would love to hear a little bit about you. We were talking about mom life before we got on, but yes, we would just love to hear about you, your family, if you know your Enneagram type.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Tori. My family looks different sometimes. I grew up in the foster care system, and I am also a foster parent now. So, right now, who our family is in our home is my two littles, my two biological littles. So I have a 4 and 6 year old who just recently turned 4 and 6,
Mm.
which I'm loving these ages right now. They are friends, which is cool. It's making them um, not as they don't need me as much, which is good.
Yeah.
I'm liking it to see and being able to see them play and love each other has been really sweet. I have a 16-year-old foster daughter, and then my sister, my biological sister, also lives in our home. She is 18, just recently graduated. And I've been married for over 6 years, about 6.5 years, to my husband, Jacob. And then yeah, we care for kiddos when needed, when we can, when we have the bandwidth, who are entering into the foster care system. Yeah, that's what home life looks like. And I'm an author and a speaker, a communicator, preacher, Bible teacher, all of those things. And oftentimes my advocacy revolves around foster care, adoption, the orphan crisis, serving vulnerable children. I help churches partner with organizations in their community,
Mm.
um, because oftentimes we just don't know how to serve the foster care community. It's not that the church doesn't want to, they just are still trying to figure it out. And so I empower and equip communities to do that in a number of ways. And yes, my Enneagram. Okay, I might need you to diagnose me, Krista, because I haven't been like super into it, but I've taken
Yeah.
a few
Yeah.
test
Hmm.
things. You
Yeah.
know, is that what they're called? Test.
Yes.
Which I've also heard you're not supposed to take the test. You're supposed to read about them and then kind of decide.
Hmm.
Okay, so here's what my Enneagram experience has been. I think I identified with the two for a really long time because I grew up in the foster care system and wanted to be loved so bad. I wanted a family. Um, I just wanted a place to belong. I wanted acceptance, and I was kind of willing to do anything to do that. I also, at the same time, I went to a college that really valued the kind of women that a two might look like a helper, um, maybe could I use the word submissive? I hope that doesn't
Yeah.
offend any
No, that's
twos. There are
okay.
some things that are said about twos that I have found offensive,
Yeah.
and hurtful, maybe like that, um, we just want people's love and we're just willing to do anything for it. And like just kind of like I don't know, make us sound like we just kind of like roll over. And so I don't want to say anything that would be like offensive towards twos, but kind of like that submissive
Yeah.
woman, compliant.
Mhm.
So the college I went to really valued that kind of woman, that kind of womanhood.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of the person that I wanted to make myself into, again, to be accepted and loved. As I have come to love and accept myself, however, more,
Mm.
and care much less about what people think, I would say that I see myself looking more like a three or a four. I don't identify with the two as heavily now, and I think
Mm.
that honestly comes from being healthier and growing out of like that fearful, that I just feel like that fearful little girl just always lived in me,
Mm.
and she's
Mhm.
still there.
Mm.
But I
Mhm.
think we've just done a lot of healing. I've done a lot of healing so that she's not only afraid, but taken care of. So, and loved and accepted. Like I love who God's created me to be. And so there's been, I feel like there's been a little, and I know again, people say, you can never change from your number,
Mm.
right? But like, I really don't feel like I'm a two.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so that's why I think maybe I could have been I've always identified with the four a lot. So I'm like, okay, I think maybe I was always a three.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to identify with the three because also heard people say bad things about that. All this to say, I'm talking like I sound a lot like a two because I care what people think. But I know. But I am very accomplish driven. My growing up, my biological mom really valued achievements and
Mhm.
accomplishments.
Mhm.
And honestly, I don't think that was a bad like thinking about it. I don't think that was a bad thing. I think it was
Yeah.
in some way like a superpower. It was a gift, especially in the situation that I entered into the foster care system. A
Mm.
lot of the statistics for youth aging out of foster care are very sad. Homelessness, jail,
Yeah.
incarceration, death, drug
Mhm.
overdose, like the list goes, addictions, the list goes on and on. Like that's what the statistics say about us. And so I think to be very accomplished driven, and achievement driven was really a gift that my mom kind of gave to me, that kept me ambitious and that kept me out of some of those dysfunctional patterns that we can so easily fall into when we grow up in dysfunction. And so, yeah, I do care. Like when I think about the four, what I know about the four,
Mhm.
you want to be original. I have a different outfit for every event.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
I love fashion. I
Mhm.
used to be really into art when I was younger, but with the work that I do now, it's kind of, I think that creativeness has bled into different things that don't look as artsy, but it's still there. So yeah, that's why I think I'm probably a three that has two and four tendencies, like wings.
Mhm. You
That's that's
really
that's
did
my
the hero.
hypothesis.
Yeah, I love the work you've done around it. I came into the interview thinking four wing three, and I
Mm,
think that you've helped me to see that you're a three who uses both wings.
mm.
And as I said, mine was an early analysis on
I
hearing
want
your
to be a four
podcast.
wing three. I think fours are so cool. So
Oh,
I want. I'm
I
sorry,
love
I
the
just really interrupted
analysis.
you. Keep saying what you're saying, but I also want to hear why you thought that I was a four because I want to be a four. I think fours are dope. I'm like, I want
Yeah.
to be a four, but I
Well,
don't know if I
okay.
am.
Yeah, well, this is where you can kind of parse it out. There's a few ways you can. And I think our twos listening, of course, are also just needing that validation. As twos get healthy, they go to eight and they really do begin to use their voice. So I think we all know, and that's what you were being so gracious to say, like when we're in that compliance stance, twos are in the compliance stance, they tend to be a little more, like you said, just the quintessential Eve. This is who you're expected to be. Don't say anything. But Eve had some rough edges. So we know that she was not just the submissive girl. And we also know we're all working out our salvation with fear and trembling, those who share our faith. So I love that you kind of started there to say, for those who maybe are listening and also learned they were not the type they initially thought, to go ahead and look around and see what other types you might be, look at the core issues. And for instead, three and four, the core issues are more that the three would say, gosh, of course, as you said, at my best, when I'm really flexing my skills, happy window of tolerance, doing healthy work, I am much more of an achiever, performer. And also, I don't struggle with vanity as much because I just know this is God's outpouring. I'm so grateful.
Mhm.
And we all have worth equally. Whereas at a
Well,
low level, they might not. And what were you going to say?
I was okay. This is another reason why I think this is the main reason why I didn't want to say it was a three. I'm remembering now.
Okay.
I want to say before I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at interrupting you. I'm so sorry,
No, I don't
Krista.
mind at all.
Your fans are gonna be like, "Gosh, this story girl is so rude."
Well, they're Enneagram typing you as you do it, so it's all right.
Right, great. Just keep diagnosing me. So I remember this is the reason I did a podcast interview with Susan Stabiles
Yes, to be all.
for my
Yep.
last book.
She's awesome. Hmm.
Love her. And she said, you are too vulnerable to be a three. You're too honest. You can't be a three. And
Mm.
I do really value vulnerability and honesty. And so that's what she was like, you're a two. And I was like, yes, ma'am. Like she's the godmother of the Enneagram. I'm
Yeah,
just like,
she's the godmother.
whatever you say, homegirl, like that's what I am. But
Mm.
at that time in my life, I wasn't as healthy as I am now.
Mm.
I was still really seeking that validation, love,
Yeah.
affirmation from the people around me.
Hmm.
So again, I'm sorry that I keep
Yeah.
interrupting you. I want to hear why you think I'm a four because I do think that fours tend to be open, vulnerable, and that is like something that I really value in my relationships on my social media to my audience,
Hmm.
um, is being honest. And is it true that threes can't do that? Because if it is, then maybe I'm not a three.
No, it's not that they can't do that. It's that I know what she's saying is like threes who are doing their work can be really truth telling because that's their whole claim to fame is, hey, I am a truth teller. That's what I do. But when I'm not as familiar with who I am, I might be just going through the cycles of like achieving to get worth because that's the core root issue is I am what I do. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
with a four, it's more about, like you said, just am I unique? Am I able to be loved with all of my flaws because I can see them all so big and they're more
Yeah.
glaring? And so you do
Yeah.
see fours as more like heart out there. Like, if anybody will take me, I'm going to be as authentic as I am. And if you won't, then I'm going to tenaciously still seek out love and grace. But I need to be who I am. I can't almost live unless I project who I am. And so when I was reading your book
Yeah.
about some of your darker moments, that's where I'm like, okay, there's some four in her no matter what, because
Yeah.
you're so vulnerable to share so much. So you're either a really healthy three who's done her work, or you're a four who's like, this is whether I'm high or low. I tend to sit here where I process with melancholy a lot, get stuck in that fixation of envy sometimes, deal with my own self-loathing as well as at times I need to take my time with things. Whereas threes are futuristic, faster moving.
Yeah.
Of course, your track regime that you talk about, like for our audience who doesn't know that, like she has all these, in addition to, like you said, all this time in the foster care system, you also come with a story of like huge perseverance and big wins on achieving through track winning state competitions. So there's my analysis is somewhere between three and four. Does that help you a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I write about this a little bit in my new book, Breaking the Patterns That Break You. It's something that I recognized when I released my first book. I never noticed it before that.
Mm.
But so as you said, I ran track in high school. I became a four-time state champion in track. But so I was in the foster care. Well, I had aged out of the foster care system at this point. But, I lived in 12 different homes, was kicked out of foster homes, always felt very unloved, very unwanted. And that was a huge part of my identity. Like, nobody loves me. I'm unlovable. Those were kind of the scripts
Yeah.
that ran through my mind.
Yeah.
And when I won my state track meet, some of the foster parents and people, some of the foster parents that kicked me out, and then like people, maybe like my friends' parents who were like, oh, you can't hang out with her because she's a foster kid, she's a bad kid, she's a trouble kid.
Mm. Yeah.
They kind of opened up to me and they came back into my life. They would let their kids hang out with me.
Mm.
And then I went on to run track in college on a full ride scholarship. I became an All-American.
Wow.
More foster parents, more people kind of kicked me out,
Mm.
came back into my life. I graduated from college. Only 3% of foster youth go on to graduate to get a bachelor's degree or higher. More foster parents who'd kicked me out came back into my life. And I
Mm.
got married, more came around. So it was like whenever there were kind of these big accomplishments or these big life moments, these people would
Mhm.
come back into my life. And so I believed it was, like classical conditioning. That's a psychological term for anyone who doesn't know. It's like if you do X, or if someone gives you X, or if you produce X, then it produces Y. And so I thought if I produced X, accomplishments, achievements, then it would produce Y. It would bring people back into my life. It would make people love me. And I didn't know that I functioned from those very destructive and thought patterns and lies,
Mm.
until I released my first book. And I mean,
Mm.
so there was a lot of drama around my first book, a lot of drama.
Oh,
And so we sold out of books. We sold double the amount that we like people pre-ordered like double the amount of what they had printed, which sounds like awesome. It's like, oh
yeah,
my God, we
that's
sold out.
awesome.
But like the really sad part was that we couldn't launch on launch day because we
Oh,
didn't have any books to send out.
that
And
is.
so then
Mm.
retailers are canceling their orders. Like Amazon just
Oh
automatically
my
cancels
God.
orders if they can't fulfill it. And they say just you'll have to reorder it when we have it available. So
Mm.
Amazon's not like responsible or held
Yeah.
liable or whatever.
Mm.
And so it was a very crushing day. And I was like, why is this so crushing to me? And I mean, I think part of it is that you pour, so anyone who's done
Right,
a
right.
book is
We
you
all
pour
know
your
that.
like life and soul into a book for
Yeah.
years, like minimum two
Yeah.
years.
Right.
And so, I mean, I poured so much into it. But then when I really asked myself, like, why am I still crying? Why are there still
Mm.
tissues like all throughout my lab? It
Yeah.
was that I thought maybe this could bring some people back. Maybe this can make more people love me. And it
Mm.
was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a thought pattern that is not healthy. Like that is a thought pattern that once was a survival mechanism and absolutely served me. And
Yeah.
it was used for good. Like I don't think we should like shame these parts of ourselves.
Mm.
Oftentimes,
Right.
those things that we function in are used for some kind of good,
Mm.
whether it's to survive or whether it's to try and get the relationships we never had. But usually, it does come to a point where it becomes so radical that it's hurtful to us and sometimes even the people around us.
Yeah. Yes, that is so well said. And you've done your work as a heart type. And I know everyone who isn't part of that 2, 3, 4 heart group needs to see what you have to say as we continue to talk today about how we can love even when we don't get the achievements or we find people don't appreciate us or people let us down, even publishers or whoever it is in our lives, because everyone here is for sure having that at some point, especially in their marriage, since it's a marriage podcast too. And you're just reminding us like you had to come to grips with yourself and even realizing why the maladaptive patterns were in place as a heart type. Like I seek to not be rejected, I seek to be loved. And I love how you're just reminding us that sometimes it really needed to come through achievements for you. It was a very tangible giving back when you were special in some way between that 3 and 4 space. And it sounds like you have some of both of those traits. And we just interviewed one of the top leading neuro psychiatrists in the world, Dr. Dan Siegel, and he said sometimes you do sit between two. You really do have a
Mm,
couple. So we'll let you sit in that
that's
tension of three
cool.
and four. Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. And do you
I
guys
like
have
that.
your,
I like sitting in the tension. That's absolutely.
yeah,
That's absolutely. So
yeah,
I'm like, yes, I like that. Let me sit in the tension. It
yeah,
feels
like
more comfortable there.
yes, minor key or like half, half past the hour. Like we're just gonna sit there. Do you guys have a sense for your hubby's type or for Jacob's type or not yet really?
Oh,
No
okay.
worries if not.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, when I met Jacob, I probably would have diagnosed him as an eight. Like a two and an eight. Like I'm a two. When
Yeah,
we first got married, he's an eight. Can
essential
you
male
imagine? It's like
type.
catastrophic.
Yeah,
It was
there's
hard.
some joy in that too, because it's like the feminine and the masculine. But like you said,
Yes.
unhealthy versions, no, not good.
Oh, yes, yeah. So, but I think as he has grown and as we have grown in our marriage, I really see him being like a nine. I think that he grew up in a space that was a little combative. I would maybe call his siblings and parents intellects. Um, so there's a little bit of debating, a lot
Yeah.
of debating kind of going
Yeah.
on. Like the challenging means that you're smart. The challenging means that you're intellectual.
Yeah.
And so I think as we have, just kind of pushed back on that and explored that in our almost 7 years of marriage,
Mhm.
I really do feel like he's come more into a nine,
Uh,
with a wing eight more than an eight wing nine.
yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
and
I
he's
love how
he
family overlay can work, where you're like,
oh yeah.
sometimes a family overlay or a backstory overlay can make us feel like we're one thing when really we weren't that thing.
Yeah, and I will say like the nine, I think the reason I question it is because I don't see necessarily like any one in him. Because right, you usually lean into your wings, like that's what is said.
You do, but some people will make that argument like, I'm just a nine. I don't have the eight and the one. But the
Yeah.
truth is, you do want to, as you know, you guys are young still, but second half of
Hmm.
life, you want to start leaning out into both wings, only because, of course, at the best of us, we have all the fruits of the spirit, right? We're so
Hmm.
expansive that we're like, I know how to use each of the types really well. I know how to be ordered like a one. I know how to, and, have margin. I know how to be helping like a two and giving, but not manipulative. Like, that's the goal. So I love that you're like, right now I see nine wing eight, and maybe that one will develop a bit later.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you talk about this like there can be tension and like there can be change because I think that has been why a lot of Christians question the Enneagram. Like
Yeah.
of course the enemy would want us to think like we're stuck like this so we can never change or
Right.
like
Right.
we're just this way, but like God is forever evolving in
Oh,
us. Like
yes.
God does not change, but the way that he works himself out in us like makes us change. And so
Hmm.
I as we heal, as we grow, as we mature. And so I love that you're saying like, oh no, there can be some change, there can be growth, like there can be
Yes.
movement in and out of one or the other because I truly haven't heard a lot of people who are like these Enneagram professionals speak in
Mhm.
that way.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I'm being always educated too, and obviously trying to stay where it's not a an idol, where it's just part of my work
Yeah.
and many amazing marriage and relationship tools out there. And it just helps you to be like, A, this is not the only thing. It's certainly not an idol, but B, it's so wonderful to know our nuances because when I read general marriage tools to help all my couples over 2 decades, it's like there's things that are so different when one is this temperament and one is that. But like you
Yeah.
said, where the danger could be coming in is I'm like, oh, no, never expect change, and you've already heard us today talking like, oh, no, that the two can change and they can become able to use their voice in a very eight, like powerful, but also loving way. Or the
Yeah.
nine can eventually later develop their one wing if they continue to grow. So thank you for just being open to that. And also,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, gosh, you have so many beautiful things in your book. I want to make sure we center around you. I want to ask you what, often when I do a book or a project, or I'm just laying it out before God, there's this part of me, and I think for most of us, this exists where there's this part of me like, why am I doing this again? Why am I putting myself through this? Where I'm, like you said, this agony of this process, and then you come to that why, and it's often very specific, like because I never want dot dot dot, or I want this. Do you feel like your beautiful new book, because I know some have your other book, Fostered but Breaking the Patterns That Break You, which I'm loving.
You have it. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, it's right there.
I'm
Ah!
so excited. I love it. It's a
There's not very
beautiful
many in
book.
print yet. I
I'm
love
so
it.
thankful and excited. So I have this book for those watching on YouTube, but what do you feel like was the why? I heard you quote the Mary Oliver quote about darkness. What would you say in this book just felt like this is why it needs to happen? This is why I have to do this.
Number one reason, my kids.
Ah,
Number
mm,
two reason, the kids in foster care who are coming after me.
mm,
So to expound on those things,
yeah.
I have to give my children the healthiest version of a mom and wife that they could ever imagine.
Mhm.
Because I, my mom had a lot of trauma and she just passed down what she knew. My mom's not some like villain or criminal. People
Right.
will hear that I went into the foster care system and they're like villainize my mom. Like my
Right.
mom was a trafficking survivor and she had we didn't have like right now, we know so
Oh my
much about
gosh.
trauma. We have
Yeah.
so many resources.
Yes.
My mom was growing up, like if someone went to therapy, they were deemed psychotic, like they were
Right.
deemed mad. And
Yes.
so my mom didn't have those resources. Now, if you're like not in therapy, people are like, you okay? Like,
Yeah. Right.
it's like such a different culture. And
Right.
so my mom, she passed down to me the best that she could. And I will pass down to my kids the best that I can. But with all of the resources that we have now on healing and all that we know now, I want to, there will still be things, that my kids, I hear people who grow up in the best homes say, my mom did this or my dad did that. And, there's always some things that just will
Mhm.
rub the next generation the wrong way. And so my hope is that I can be a person that does the work and that apologizes for when my kids may say that when I'm older. And that, but I can truly say what I know about my mom is to be true, that she did the absolute best with what we had.
Mhm.
So that's the number one reason. I want to be an excellent, good, loving, caring mom that reflects the heart of Jesus, so that my kids know Jesus, so that my kids live healed and whole and full,
Mm.
abundant lives, in a way that I may have very easily not have if I didn't have all of the people and love that I have had growing up.
Wow.
Um, and
Gosh.
then, yeah, the second thing is there are youth in foster care, kids who have come from very hard places. And I mean, I'm not like the model. There are many very
Yeah.
successful former foster youth. There are a lot of um, adults who were kids who came from very hard places. I'm not like the one. I don't feel like the world's on my shoulders by any means, but I am, I am a one. I am someone that these young adults, that these youth, these kids look to, and they believe that they can overcome. They believe that they can persevere.
Mm.
They believe that they can overcome, go through the
Mm.
hard things that they have went through because they see that someone else has done it. Um, so yeah, that's why I do the work. It's really just for the generations coming after me. That's why it's breaking the
Mm.
patterns that break you, because we want to break those generational patterns, those thought patterns, relationship patterns that are unhealthy, so that the next generation doesn't they don't bleed into the next generation.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And also, I can hear the depths as you talk about your mom too, like with the grace and protection of knowing that she got you to where you are now in a way because she gave her best and you want to give your best and you realize that her ceiling was your floor. And you're
Yeah.
also aware that you came with some scars. And so you're saying, no one is going to give their kids a perfect childhood or adulthood, but in Christ, we can do so much more than we ever could through the gift of love that you talk about so beautifully in the book. But I also just appreciate you being candid with us, just being so real to say, I'm on the journey too with you. And so when I lose my way, and I think everyone in our audience needs to do that, when you lose your way in life, what is the thing that makes you need to come back to that purpose? And do you feel like when you started having kids, that just immediately became aware of you? Or had your first foster child, did you feel like it's just this has been with you for a long time?
It's been with me for a long time. So this is more in my first book, but I had a teacher in like the eighth grade,
Mhm.
and he said we were reading the Seven Habits of a Highly Effective Teenager, which is like a spin-off teen version of the Seven Habits of a Highly Effective Person.
Mhm.
And he said the first rule is begin with the end in mind.
Mm.
And so he explained it like, if we say this is the beginning, like the eighth grade, your eighth grade really matters because it's preparing you for high school, and your transcripts, they'll be permanent, they'll go to colleges.
Mm.
And some of you really need to go to college, because if you don't go to college, you're going to end up like your parents. And that
Mm.
just struck me. I was like, oh.
Mm.
And I had this kind of like this vision epiphany in the classroom. And I had this vision of what life was like with my mom, where there were some unsafe people who came into our home, and there were
Mm.
drugs on the table. And my sister watched TV. I have a sister who's 10 years younger than me, and she
Gosh, yeah.
would watch TV all day. And I took care of her in the in between. And
Mm.
then I pictured like this life where my kids, they had a family that was safe, that loved them, that
Mm.
protected them, that they just had the things that I didn't. You know, there weren't drugs on the table, there were toys on the table.
Mm.
And I realized in that eighth grade classroom, like that's when my kids were like planted into my heart in that eighth grade classroom. Like I knew I was going to be a mom someday in that eighth grade classroom. And I knew that I had to change in some way to have a different future
Mm.
than what I was given. And so I was like a CD student at that time, and I actually started applying myself in school. I became a 4.0 student.
Mm.
It's when I started taking my athletic career and my grades just really seriously. My relationships with my teachers, I started to take really seriously, like with authority figures.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and ever since, like just wanting to. And I know that some people are listening to this and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe a public school teacher said that. Because it's kind of bold. I
It's
think
bold.
about that. I'm like, I can't
I
believe he
love
said
that.
that. Like, because some kids are going to go back to their families and be like, this is what my eighth grade teacher said. And they're going to be like, what?
Yeah.
But like, I just love when people say the thing that really needs to be said.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
because yeah, that could have been a really controversial thing, but like it really planted a seed in me that changed my mindset and my heart for the good.
Mm. And that gives you such an appreciation for people willing to go there. And you and your husband have learned from, like you said, his family's patterns. Like, don't be so debating about it, but like coming in with some spice is okay to be like, this is a passion piece for obviously that teacher. Like, he could have easily, I think, debated any person who came in to say, like,
Right.
hey, don't you want your ceiling to be your kid's floor? Like, do you want them to be just like you? And I also think it gave you this sense of like, I don't have to be like you already knew this, but like there's also for some of those kids that sense of like you don't have to be just like your parents. You can break the cycle. And
Yes.
so I love that he was bold. That's beautiful. And you had other
Yeah.
teachers to truly mentor you. And everyone out there, if you've had somebody to mentor you, or as you said, your why was so you could be that mentor to others that even in your moments of darkness and doubt that you talk about in this book, you also are uplifting others to know, like, when I am on the floor and feeling like it doesn't matter, I remember what somebody did for me. I'm not going
Yeah.
to go without that. It sounds like that's huge for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another like I know there's like these moments. There are these moments in my life that are like pivotal. At the same time, though, it's so hard to pinpoint one thing.
Yeah.
And I know like you know this too when we're talking about brands and social media and podcasts, like all these things. Everyone wants you to like niche down to something because that's what's going to
Right.
make you grow. And
Right.
like at the end of the day, I just feel like I'm human and that's what I want to present. And there's just so many different facets that's made me who I am. Part of it is trauma and brokenness from my
Yeah.
childhood. That's like living with my biological mom. A huge part of it is growing up in the system and understanding the injustices that kids like have to endure. They're like just literally victims of the system. And then
Yeah.
it's people who then came into my life and showed me radical hospitality. So like I value hospitality so much. I value mentorship so much. I value talking about trauma and psychology so much. And
Yeah.
then like I love athletics. I
Yeah.
think that like our brain and our body are so connected. And I could talk
Yes.
about like sports and working out for hours. And so I think that, there's just so much that has made me who I am. It truly has been such a journey. And I think sometimes when we niche down like that, we or try to even, point to like this one pivotal moment, we
Yeah.
kind of lose our humanness. We lose
Mm.
like the vastness of who God has created us to be and
Mm.
like the beautiful story that he's like writing and he's written and that he's writing. And so
Mm.
yeah, like
Mm.
just so many people. There was this named Tanya. She was my mentor, and
Mhm.
she just let me into her home. And there's that verse in First Thessalonians that says, like, we loved you so much, we didn't just want to tell you the gospel of God, but we wanted to welcome you into our lives as well. And
Ooh,
so, that
wow.
scripture is just like, it's so powerful that, like, yes, like, invite people to church, yes, tell people of the love that God has for them, but like, you got to invite people in for them to actually be convinced of it. Yeah, you have to show them your love for them, and it has to be consistent with your words. So yeah, just so many, different facets, different people, different moments that have really formed me, and I'm so, so grateful for every single one of them. People often ask me, could you, if you could, would you like ever change your story? And I would never, like, I never, not even the most traumatic moments would I change or take back, because it's just made me who I am today.
Mm, amen. Oh my goodness. And that reminds me of me hearing you on a pod where you talked about Joseph, who's one of my absolute favorite Old Testament Joseph
Yeah.
biblical heroes, where Genesis 50:20, where he's like, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And
Yes.
some people didn't even mean it for evil. It just happened. Evil just shot out of
Hmm.
their mouth
Yeah.
because he didn't have good coping techniques, but God still used it for good. And so you're just saying like part of the reason you're standing is because of that. And I just really want everybody to know that who's listening. Like, if you have major trauma, Tori has been there. You may have already read Fostered, but you share about it here candidly as well. And when you get those tinges where it hits you again, like you're even saying, you don't have to niche down to just one tool. I love how you're telling us
Mm-mm.
all. You're very expansive in the ways that you cross the thought and body barrier to say, I could do this. Here's another tool in my coping bag.
Yeah.
And I love that you specifically in this book, for those who are dealing with destructive patterns in their marriage or their life, you talk about disempowering those cycles. What do you feel like has been a good tool for you in your life or marriage where you're like, when I hit a wall, when I feel like the cycle is back, I'm getting, let's just say one of the common things like sad,
Okay.
jealous, anxious, bitter, like what is a way that our listeners will want to get your book for, especially, of course, to dig deeper, but like, what is a way you help us to process through those moments
So
or
in
that
the
you've used?
Yeah, in the book, I use the analogy of a house, because my husband and I love old houses and we've renovated them. And also the Psalms say that God is our safe house. And so,
Mhm.
we're meant to reflect God, and at the end of the day, we want to be a safe house. Again, that value for hospitality that I have, and the way that people have been a safe house for me, I want to reflect that. I want to reflect that love, that kind of hospitality, of the people who have discipled me and walked with me have, and also the character of God.
Mm,
And so I use this analogy of a safe house, and how we people who have been through just immense trauma, we look at our house and it feels like it's just in ruins. Like,
mm,
the foundation is crumbled, the walls have been just, punched and, kicked through with hurtful words and lies. And it's like, how do I even restore this to what God intends it to be? And so we do that by tools. We do
mm,
that with tools and a lot of patience. And when I've restored, we only restored, it's this 100-year-old duplex, and it was hard. And it was like,
wow.
when we would start like one project, and it'd be like, okay, there's like this one thing that we have to kind of mend or fix.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you like bust it open and it's like 12 things. I was like, oh my gosh, I thought this was going to be one thing. And
Yeah.
that's like the process of healing. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is one thing, and then you bust it open, and it's like, okay, that opened up a
Oh,
lot more
that's
than I
so
expected.
good. I love that analogy. And I love how in the book you say, like, hey, my husband loves to do the actual housework and that you like restoring the house and that you love to be the hospitality who's like, let's do that so we can welcome people in.
Yes.
But
Yes.
whatever the vision is, as you said, it can be a lot of digging.
Exactly. And my husband, like, what I say is, like, my husband, these tools, like, he worked alongside his dad, like, in the garage, or they would do these projects when he was a kid. So, and his parents were very good parents, they were attentive throughout his upbringing. He got to do a lot of these. these things that like boys get to do with their dads. And so he knew how to use tools like as a young
Mhm.
adult person. And like I'm looking at these tools, I'm like, what is this? Like I don't
Yeah.
even know what this is.
Yeah.
And so Jacob had to teach me, and it took me more time than it did him. And that's sometimes like
Yeah.
that's what it is. Like we look at these tools for healing and for growth, and we're like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
And I don't, and we look at the broken thing and we're like, I don't even know how to fix that. And so we have to be patient with ourselves, and we have to be willing to take time to learn. And then, we get the skill of using the tool, it then becomes easier. And then, we grow in it, and it becomes not so cumbersome. Like tools are cumbersome. You think about a drill and you're like trying to put it into a
Oh,
wall and you're like hand shaking, and like I'm like this drill is stronger than me.
yeah.
But like eventually when you're using that drill, like you become steadier. And the drill is a tool that helps you like fix the thing, heal the thing that needs to be healed. And so, yeah, when I think about it, I think about one, patience with yourself to learn. And then the book, it actually has these 14 lies. The chapters are lies, that they're like headers. And then we
Yeah.
dig deep into these lies. And it's not just like one lie, right, that hurts us. It's
Yeah.
maybe one overarching lie, but then, like I said, there's like multiple lies within that lie that we have to dissect. And so the book has 14 kind of overarching lies and then a bunch of lies within those lies that we address. And they're all very subtle. Like we don't know, oftentimes we don't know like the patterns in our life. We don't know that. And that's why like the book can be a hard sell, because we're just kind of oblivious sometimes to the destructive patterns that are happening. They're very subtle, they're often silent, and we don't recognize the wreckage that it's causing until it is like wreckage. And
Yeah.
so
Mm.
the book addresses these lies, and my hope is to give people scripts. So a lot of people who've grown up in traumatic situations, whether you've had these patterns that have been handed down to you, they create scripts in your head, or you've actually been spoken over like these scripts, like I'm not loved. Like what my upbringing taught me is I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, I am not good enough, I am never going to be good enough, I don't belong, right? And so I have to like understand, where do these lies come from? How do they bleed into other thought patterns? And how do I address them? And then turn those scripts when I'm just laying in my bed, like I don't belong, everybody hates me, da, 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 da. How do I turn those scripts into truth? And it's like, I am loved, actually. I have so many people who love me and who want to take care of me and who've walked with me through hard things. And so the idea of this book is really to take those lies, that are thought patterns that can so easily bleed into behavioral patterns that can then so easily bleed into generational patterns,
Mm.
and give you a different script, give you a different
Mm.
idea, change
Mm.
those behaviors, so that they can stop at the root, at the core.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. You really get it. And this is where the layered work you've done comes in handy because you do understand the mind body connection and the heart connection to those and the
Yeah.
spiritual connection underlying all of that. And you're just reminding us, like, having gone through it, having still going through it at times, you know the scripts you need, and you know how those scripts have changed you. The narrative approach has worked for you to remember God's truth and the truth about your experience, that there's, like Mr. Rogers, my husband reminds me sometimes, said, when there's bad crises going on, look for the helpers. And you're able to do that work because you're a heart type who's like, I'm facing rejection wounds, whereas some of us in the safety group are like, I'm facing worries about other things. Can I trust people? And then others are like, am I wrong? Am I right? Are they wrong? Am I right? Those eights, nines, and ones in that justice group. So I love how you have scripts for all of us in that way. And
Mm,
that's where I think the book is an easy sell, is people are desperate for those scripts.
yeah.
And they're not always in our minds. Unfortunately, the negative automatic thought is what's in our mind.
Yeah.
And when you do, I was going to ask you how you feel less alone sometimes when suicidal ideation creeps in, as you mentioned in the book, but I think you just said it. Like, it's knowing that there are truths you can speak back when the lies come in. Is that right?
Yeah, I love that you didn't shy away from that topic. I wrote about suicidal ideation in the book because I feel like it's something that we shy away from as a culture as a whole, until someone until someone passes, and then we all want to address it, but it's like, well, it's too late. We need to address it. Like, it needs to be a topic that we talk about in
Yeah.
life, and
Yeah.
especially in Christian spaces, it's just become really a
Yeah.
taboo, scary topic
Yeah.
to address. And so, yes, I've struggled with suicidal ideation from a very young age, and one of the ways that I've combated this, and I would want to give it to anyone, this tool is, so I'm a public speaker. I get to communicate. I'm communicating here and I'm telling people, like, you are worthy of love and God did a good job making you. And
Yeah.
oftentimes I go to places where there are kids who've come from hard places, and I tell them that, like, you're so worthy of love. God
Yeah.
did a good job making you. There's a beautiful plan and purpose for your life, and I just speak truth over them. And there's just one point, throughout this journey, I've been doing that for probably, I mean, to some extent since I was like 18, so like 10 years.
Mm.
And I was just laying in bed, all those scripts like, nobody loves you. You're never going to be worthy of love.
Oh.
Everybody hates you. And it was like, how can I give
Mm.
people this
Yeah.
but not believe it myself? And it just hit me like, what is true for these
Mm.
other kids is also true for me. And I know there are people listening to this who are
Yes.
like, I can look at my neighbor and I
Mm.
can say the truth over them.
Mhm.
And if it's true for them, yes, I can believe it for myself. And it is, it's much harder to believe it for ourselves, but I know that there are so many people who so easily say it for someone else. And if you can so easily say it for someone else, you can say it for yourself too. Like, it's not conceited,
Mm.
it's not
Yes.
selfish.
Mm.
It's like to honor who God has created us to be, to acknowledge that is to honor him. It is to give him glory. Like, he made man and woman good. That's what the
Yeah.
scriptures say. And so, that's just one of like the kind of scripts that I can bring my mind back and be like, you know what? Even if I can't think about this for myself, I'm going to think about it for my neighbor. If someone I loved was feeling this way, or even someone I barely knew was feeling this way, like, I would think that about them. And if I can think that about them, I can give myself permission to think it for myself. I
Mm.
deserve life. I'm
Mm.
good. I am loved. I am worthy to keep on going.
Oh, wow. I love that. And I really appreciate you saying to our listeners and to yourself, because we love you too, as we get to know you. Like, you're loved if you're in that space listening, saying, like, it's everybody but me because I screwed up more. And so many people have the opposite heuristic. The quick mental process that most people do is, I'm better than others. And like
Mm,
we're being honest about today, sometimes, and I believe everybody at some point has that feeling of shame come over them, especially when you're trying to level up. Like you said, it just
mm,
hits you even harder sometimes. Because you're like, I shouldn't be human, I should be better. And so I just love that you just named it. Like, if you ever have a moment of despair, remember you are allowed the same grace as God gives to everybody. His grace is sufficient for us. His power is made perfect in weakness.
hmm.
So we can boast about those weaknesses. And I love that
Yeah.
you did bring it into your book. Something I've tried to teach my kids too is, I know my daughters are going to have the 4 week cycles. They already do. I know they're going to have some postpartum
Yeah.
issues. I know my son has already dealt with some anxiety. And I'm like, if you ever despair of life, know that you're human, and
Yeah.
there are tools,
We're
right?
human. Yes, we're human. And we can't, one of the quotes that I say in the book is like, we can't heal ourselves out of being human. Like, we're
Mm.
human. And like, we're not miniature gods. We're human, and that deserves a lot of grace, patience, love, compassion.
Mm, beautiful. Well, I have one final question for you, and this one is one that I think heart types do a bit better with than other types. And I think we all have something to teach the other groups,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I feel like it's that part of us that I just said is like where you're sort of like some of the other types we judge more. We're like, quick mental heuristic. I'm better. Like, why are you
Mhm,
hurting me? Because I shouldn't have been hurt by you. And I feel like
mhm,
what I see with heart types is more hospitality, more patience, more love. And for our listeners who are married and struggling in those middle marriage years, it can be pretty thinking of the sweaty emoji right now. How can we invite ourselves to think more generously about our spouse, about each other,
mhm.
if we tend to be a little more on the judgy side?
Yeah, gratitude. That's it.
Mm.
Like so often I think when we look at our spouses, because we're with them all the time, we see the ins and outs, we see the worst and the best. And this is just in our culture as a whole, in society, the way that we see all things is like the bad always outweighs the good.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
if we can move ourselves towards, even if the good is really good, like the bad just always seems so heavy. And so if we can move ourselves towards gratitude for who our spouse is and what they do bring to the table, even in the littlest things, I think that it moves us just towards an equilibrium, rather than the bad outweighing the good. We begin to see things for what they actually are.
Mm. Thank you. And that gratitude creates that ability for you to give, like you said earlier, those healthier scripts about them too, not just yourself.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Like you don't just see them like for their flaws or for their mistakes or for their shortcomings, but
Yeah.
you see them. And just a reminder, you have them too. Sometimes we forget that. I know I do. I forget
Okay,
that.
you
Like,
do like
you just
me. Okay.
you see, like we so easily see all the shortcomings like in our spouse, and then we forget like actually I'm pretty demanding and pretty impatient and pretty selfish
Mhm.
sometimes too. And I think
Yeah.
when we can see, like, oh, this is what my spouse does for me, this is what they bring to the table, this is who they are to our kids, um, I think that we can see, like, oh, often that's what I do. If I can see that in my husband, I see, like, wow, he really is so complimentary to
Yeah.
me. And like the things that I can be grateful that he has that I often don't,
Mhm.
are the reason why we're married.
Yeah. Thank you. Exactly. Like we married someone who would do what we're trying to do with ourselves and God, which is to make us more expansive, to share their gifts,
Yeah.
but also to just share
Yes.
them with joy. And that's been on my mind lately too, is well, your spouse isn't like you because that's your gift to give to them. So thank
Yes.
you for reminding me of that because that's one I struggle with.
Oh,
My husband and I are both
oh,
in the idealist triad. So we really can be like, we want to be at the top of the mountain all the time. Get up here. And then they're
yeah.
like, no, I'm up here.
Yeah,
So
yes, yes.
so thank you so much, Tori. You're a wealth of wisdom and tell
Oh,
everybody where they can get your book. I'm making sure to share this just as it's coming out. So tell us about where
yeah.
they can get it and get to know you better.
Yeah. My new book, Breaking the Patterns That Break You, you can get it anywhere books are sold, whether that's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Target, all the places.
Sure.
And if this goes out before my book releases, please pre-order the book. Pre-orders are so important for authors.
Mm.
But if not, my hope is that, that you get it despite whether you get it before it comes out or when it comes out, that you get it and that it serves you. That it is just a balm to your heart.
Mm.
And you can follow me at Tori Hope Petersen on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. And Tori Hope Petersen. Petersen is all E's, not
Mhm.
Sen.
Thank you. Beautiful. And I love it because we are putting it out before orders, but also for those listening later, get the book.
Yeah,
You will not regret getting to work through these lies that hit
yeah.
everybody. Thank you so much, Tori. It's been such a joy to have
Thank you.
you.
Thank you for having me. You are lovely.
Oh, thank you. Wow, guys, I hope you were just as touched as I was by Tori's beautiful and vulnerable sharing. I love how she's wrestling in that four wing three, three wing four space, but how she also welcomes growth and expansion and doesn't want to, again, be a victim to any type, but to look at her patterns and make the most of them and grow with us. How beautiful to see her doing that as a young woman. And I just want to remind you that you have that capacity too. So keep learning and growing. Don't forget to get her beautiful book, Breaking the Patterns That Break You. And as we finish up this episode, I just want to let you know that it's such a fun thing to be able to watch people do their work and to know that you are a part of it. So share this episode with somebody you love who needs encouragement or this book. And you and they will be able to help so much better when you know you're all doing this beautiful work together. So, okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.